Hi folks, whether or not you have done research before for other assignments, using research for conducting speeches is a little bit different than essay writing. So today I'd like to talk to you about finding evidence and what plagiarism is and how to cite sources for your research during speeches, which is different than citing sources for essays. Whenever you have a research project going on, you always want to start with what you know and anticipate what types of information you need to find. It is not a bad idea to write a working thesis statement prior to doing research. The working thesis statement is fluid. You can change it once you find your information and you start to draft. But having a working thesis statement ahead of time affords you the opportunity to have a clear direction and to have some ideas for what you're trying to find. If you can also guess on some of the subtopics for your main heads, it's not a bad idea to jot those down as well so you have a clear direction as you continue to research for information. If you don't have your subtopics right away, they'll probably come to you while you conduct research. Before you go to the library or whatever your source will be for conducting research, think ahead. Think, where might I find information for my topic? Might there be some people whom I can interview? Might there be some print sources our library has or I can get through Library Loan? Are there some news broadcasts I could look up online and use those as evidence? It always benefits you to try to use a variety of source types, not just focusing only on a print source of one variety or only on websites. Websites can be problematic. They have to be credible. So if you want to use something like a .com, you really need to look into whether or not the information is reliable and if it's verifiable. I understand that some of you have unique topics, but that does not mean any basic .com will do. I know I've mentioned Wikipedia before as something that I prefer you don't cite. I'm not saying never go on Wikipedia. I will honor the fact that it is a wealth of great information on Wikipedia. If you use that as a starting point, please go to the sources listed on the bottom of the wiki page and go to those sources rather than focusing on getting your information from Wikipedia. Regardless of whether you use print, online, personal sources, whatever you do, remember to keep track of your sources while you conduct your research and to keep track of where each piece of research is from while you are doing so. It really is a waste of time for you to have to go back and re-find a source because you forgot to write it down ahead of time. Take it from me, I've made that mistake before, and it's a lot more efficient to take 15 seconds and write down your source information right away than to have to go back and re-find the information. I've already mentioned the unique sources you could use, so just jot these down and don't discount them. Even a government office, like let's say you're going to do a speech about hunting. Why not go down to the DNR office in Palmyra and try to interview someone? You could email a government official. You could email an author. You can have a lot of variety of places to look. And don't forget, our school is full of people who are almost experts in many fields. As you conduct your research, it benefits you to stay organized. Make sure you always keep track of where information's from. Write down any notes you think you might use. It's best to get down more than you'll use for your speech. Some techniques people like to use would be writing your research down on note cards using the research card technique, where you might have a topic at the top of the research card that would give information about what that card was about, and every time you have research on that same type of information, you include the same heading, and you can organize it more easily later on. If you're interested in that particular structure, I have some resources available for you. Another idea would be to have a different document or piece of paper for each topic, listing it at the top, writing down your research. When you do your research, whether you use note cards or a piece of paper or whatever strategy you enjoy, be certain you are keeping track of the source and writing the source down for the information each time. When you get to writing your speech and you're using the research that you conducted, you have to cite the source, whether you are using that research as a direct quotation, as a paraphrase, or as a summary. You did not come up with the information on your own if you had to use research for it, so you do need to cite that information. Also, even if you have unique knowledge because of your past experiences, if the information you're providing is not common knowledge, you probably should find it in a source that you can cite. You do not need to cite info that's common knowledge, like, for instance, the sun is a star is common knowledge, but its distance between the Earth and itself is not common knowledge. So if you're not really certain, cite it or ask. If you find the same information in multiple sources, it benefits you to cite more than one at times, especially if you're engaging in persuasion. But if you cite like 5 sources, that can get a little bit cumbersome and hard to listen to. So maybe cite 2. You need to cite sources for speeches because failure to do so is plagiarism. It's the law to credit people for their information. If you plagiarize for our class, you could receive an F on your speech the first time and a WF the second time. But more importantly, it's important you learn to not plagiarize now so you don't have huge consequences later on in life too, like in college or your profession. So regardless of whether you are using information as a quotation, a summary, or a paraphrase, you do need to cite it. When you're speaking and you're going to give verbal citations, you do not have parenthetical references. The verbal citation will take the place of a parenthetical reference that you might put in an essay. In your essay, you do not have parenthetical references. No parentheticals. The good rule is for you to provide enough information for your listeners to seek out the source if they want to. So verbally, you give them the author and maybe the source type and title. Give enough for us to find it on our own. You never use parenthetical references in your speaking notes because you would not verbally give a page number or just the author's last name. And so you might get confused as a speaker. Instead, write out the citation in your speech as you will verbally state it. This piece of information here is in reference to the first time you use a source in a main head. So we're talking about just one section of your speech, like one body paragraph in an essay. Your textbook states that normally you identify your sources briefly at the end of the information itself. You generally do not cite it prior to the information because people do not know yet if they want to pay attention to your source. They have not yet heard the information. When you give your citation, give the name of the author, the name of the source. You might need to give a date if it's a fluid news source. You might not. But you definitely need the author, and you definitely need the name of the source. It might help us to know what type of source it was. So was it on the web? Was it a book? Those might be helpful pieces of information too. Regardless, remember, we're talking about the first time you use a source in a main head. And we are also referring to groups of information. You are not going to cite every single sentence that you say. You're going to refer to groups of information. For instance, if you think of a book, what types of information do you need to find a book if you're a listener? You really only need the author's name and the book title. The book's qualifications for the author are not needed to avoid plagiarism. They're just needed to help you build credibility. So, it's a good idea to include the speaker qualifications, but they're not necessary to avoid plagiarism. To avoid plagiarism, you do need the author's name and the book title. Internet sources are more unique. Please do not ever give the web address unless the web address is the name of the website like espn.com. If there's an author, always give the author and qualifications. But as you know, many websites don't have an author. If they don't, you might question whether or not you're looking at a credible source. If it's an organization, then and it's credible, cite the organization. Give the name of the website. The qualifications of the website are needed only if your listeners will not know what the website is. CNN.com is obvious, but less well-known websites are not. So when you do internet sources, you might not need all of this information. Give us enough to find it on our own, and give us enough information to know that the website is credible. For other unique sources, like maybe a personal interview or a magazine article, maybe a news broadcast, one more time, give us enough information to find it on our own. Always give the author, no matter what, and the title. Remember, dates depend. Here's an example of if I go into main head 2 and I'm citing this pamphlet again, I need to give this information again the next time that I cite it, okay? I can't just say the blood center indicates. I need to give that information again in main head 2. And if I mention Chad Tolbert in main head 2, I need to say Chad Tolbert again. So the information exists within a main head. The first time you use a source, give all the information. The second time within a main head, you don't need to. When you go to the next main head or the next section of your speech, you need to give all the original citation information again. So in summary, like I just said on the previous slide, the second time you use a source, if you are using it close to the original citation and within the same main head, mention the source name and the author, as well as the fact it is a source you mentioned before. If you're using the source again in a different main head, provide all the citation information again. You do need to have a works cited page for your speech. This works cited page is not something in life that you would give to every single audience member, but if you give a formal speech in a business situation, you would make it available upon request. And I'm requesting one, so I do need to hand in a works cited page in MLA format. So in summary, remember to give enough information for people to find the citations on their own if they need to. We will talk about making a works cited page in a separate presentation.